Good morning, Mets fans, and welcome to a Monday edition of Driving with Mr. Met. I am Mr. Met, and it's been a week since I've recorded any videos, and wanted to get back to you guys today. Talk about some developments in the Mets managerial search, talk about where we are with the World Series, and I guess that's about it. So I'll do that on today's show. Being away for the last couple of weeks, more than I've been home, has actually kind of been a blessing in disguise because I didn't have to record any, or wasn't able to record any videos, and there just hasn't been that much to talk about related to the Mets. This managerial search, which is playing out like an episode of The Bachelor, or some kind of like ridiculous TV reality show, is continuing to progress. The top target, as we now know, signed with the Phillies. So Girardi is the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, which is bad on multiple levels. But I mean, the worst of it is that we're gonna have to, we're gonna have to face a team helmed by the guy that the Mets should have been getting 18 times next year. So that's terrific. Basically 1/6 of the season or so is going to be spent playing these guys and his team, and that's a bummer. It's a bummer. Actually, it's less than 1/6. I guess it's like 1/8, but still, that's like 12.5% of the season. But regardless, it's Girardi was the guy for the Mets, and the problem now is, are the Mets going to end up pulling in another first-time manager? And it seems as though that's most likely to be the case. These bombshells have been dropping the last couple of days, where sort of like random candidates are being included in the list and in the search and stuff. And I don't know that there's any validity to any of this stuff because, again, as everyone's been reporting, and really look no further than Andy Martino, who is typically, spot on, and he's always seems to have the pulse of the team and the Mets. And in this instance, he has no clue either, and he flat out said it on last week's Shanny Thing podcast, where he said, like, look, they're really being tight-lipped about this. They're not saying a thing, and everyone is basically speculating. He almost confirmed as much. Last week when he made his proclamation that he really has no idea what's going on, and it's guessing and sourcing and heard it through the grapevine sort of stuff. I heard it from a friend of a friend of a friend. He said what she said, what he said, sort of thing, and hearing everything third and fourth hand. It's how things get bungled, and so I don't know how realistic and logical, rather, the reporting is surrounding all of this stuff, because it's really just speculation. We don't know. We don't know who's going to be the manager. None of the reporters know. These talks about these bombshell candidates, we don't know, because we don't really know what the full list is. The reporting this morning is basically that Brody's starting a third round of interviews. And give the guy credit, man. He's being thorough as hell. There's that much that we can look at. I think it's down to 3 candidates, truthfully. I think it's down to Eduardo Perez, Tim Bogar, and Carlos Beltran. And there's degrees for each of these guys. And, Beltran, to me, for this Mets team, makes the most sense, just because of the career that he had, the respect that he commands, how intelligent he is about the game, his history in New York City as a player, both young and older, more mature, his dealing with the media, etc. He seems to check a lot of boxes. The big glaring box that he's not checking, of course, is managerial experience. He has none. And that's where Tim Bogar sort of fills in for me, like, as the next guy, because Tim Bogar has been managing and coaching in the major leagues since, I think, something like 2004 or 2005, if I remember the history correctly. And he's done pretty well for himself as a coach throughout the minor leagues and a manager throughout the minor leagues. He's been in a bunch of different big league benches as in various different roles, from first base coach, where he is now with the Nationals. He's been a hitting coach. He's been a bench coach. and he's been an interim manager for a sliver of games after Ron Washington got let go in Texas. But I think Bogart's an interesting choice just because he's got the history, but he doesn't have the pedigree. And then there's the wild card, who I think is Eduardo Perez, who, again, doesn't really have any managerial experience, but that's not true. I shouldn't say that. I take that back. He does have managerial experience. He has managed in the Dominican League for winter ball, which I think by all accounts is very much a professional baseball organization. So he does have experience. He also has the analytics background that the Mets would like. So those are the three guys who I think it's going to come down to. I don't think that's a news flash or a shock to anybody, but it would be nice if the Mets just made this decision. If they announced it in a couple of days. Don't keep waiting and dragging things out. Have this thing settled so that the new manager and the general manager can get together, pick a coaching staff, get this stuff sort of out of the way before the winter meetings begin, and really focus on this roster when that happens. Speaking of former managers and Mickey Callaway, it's worth noting that Mickey Callaway got himself a 3-year deal to be the pitching coach under Joe Maddon in Los Angeles with the Angels. So kudos to Mickey for bouncing into a new job right away. Not surprised that he's not managing again. Not his strong suit, as I think we all saw. But Mickey's a great guy, and I wish him the very best in Anaheim, where he'll have Garrett Cole on his staff next year. Yes, that's my early prediction for Garrett Cole. He's going to end up with the Angels. So moving on, as the Mets hopefully do after they've selected their manager today, tomorrow, or Wednesday, whatever. Let's talk a little bit about the World Series. So last week, before the World Series kicked off, I said this is going to be a series is going to be owned and dominated by the Astros. I felt like the Nats had sat around too long after the close of the NLCS, and the Stros were sort of battling tooth and nail almost all the way through this playoffs. This despite them being the best team in baseball statistically and with the win-loss record and everything, they had to really fight to get past Tampa, and they had to really fight to get past the Yankees. So they extended both of those series to their final games, and there is something to say about that because it keeps the team on edge. It doesn't let the team slow down at all or let up at all. It's just like, let's keep going. We've got to win. We've got to win. And the Nats had that in the beginning of this playoff run, where they were. The Nats were, in elimination game after elimination game, facing elimination every left turn and whatnot, and they rode that momentum to get where they are now in the World Series. But I figured the days off were going to be really going to force a hiccup on them. I was completely wrong. They came out in Houston, as now we all know this. And they beat Cole and Verlander in back-to-back games in games 1 and 2. So, right there, I was like, holy shit, I completely underestimated this Nationals team. These guys are legit. This series is going back to D.C. The Nats have a 2-0 lead. This is actually going to happen. And then the last 3 games happened, and the Astros pretty much owned these 3 games against the Nats. Pretty much mop-up duty with this team with the Nationals. Sort of like, I don't know what happened. I don't know if they let up a little bit. I have no idea. I don't know if it was nervousness to be in front of their home crowd for the first time in a World Series. I don't know. But they significantly underperformed in the last 3 games, and now the Astros find themselves leading 3-2. So I'm not completely wrong with my prediction. I still think the Astros are going to take the World Series. I didn't think it was going to go this far, though. I didn't think it was going to get beyond 4 games. So I guess for the fact that the Nationals have made this an interesting World Series, I tip my cap to them. But they have a very, very tall hill to climb. Defeating Verlander for a second time in the same series is going to be hard. It is worth noting that Verlander, and I was surprised to hear this, has never won a World Series game. I think he's 0-5 now in World Series games. So take that for what it's worth. I suspect tomorrow night we're going to see his first W, because he's got to be locked in on that. Getting off the schneid with that mark and putting the nail on the coffin for the Nationals and giving the Astros their second World Championship in the last 3 years. So I will be back probably on Wednesday to chat a little bit about what's happened in Game 6 from Houston on Tuesday night, which again I suspect will be the final game of the World Series. But let's see if I'm right on that. We'll talk on Wednesday and see what's up. After that, I am going to talk a little bit about the awards season, which picks up. Rookie of the Year. Mets have some interesting names, of course, in Rookie of the Year with Alonso, with the Cy Young, with DeGrom looking for back-to-back awards. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the week after the World Series is over and sort of prep for the offseason. And, of course, as soon as they name the man in charge, I will talk about the new Mets manager. So until that time comes, whether it's tomorrow, Wednesday, Friday, next Thursday, I'll be back to talk about it. And until then, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter if you're not already doing so at Mr_Met. That's MISTER_MET. And as always, let's go Mets.